Step into the captivating world of the Behind the Curtain podcast, where your dynamic hosts, John Dyer and Dr. Mohammed Saleh, bring together a wealth of 60 years of combined experience in healthcare and manufacturing. Join us every week as we delve into intriguing topics, weaving unscripted conversations that promise to take you on an unpredictable and enlightening journey. Gain valuable insights for your continuous improvement adventure as we navigate uncharted territories with enthusiasm and expertise. Welcome to a podcast that goes beyond the ordinary, unraveling the mysteries behind the curtain of knowledge.
So welcome to our very first podcast. We're excited for you to be here with us. I tell you, Dr. Mohammed and I have had a real joy putting this together and planning this out. And we're very excited to share our stories with you, our expertise with you, both what's worked and what hasn't worked in our 60 years of doing Lean Six Sigma, team-based transformations. My name is John Dyer, and for those that don't know me, I've been at this for over 35 years. I started my career with General Electric and then joined Ingersoll Rand and worked my way up to a vice president of global continuous improvement for the company. Then I went out and started my own consulting company, and I've been doing this for over 15 years now. I don't have a doctoral degree like Dr. Mohammed does, but I do have a master's in international business through the University of Rouen in France and Purdue University here in the U.S. And then my undergraduate degree is actually in electrical engineering with an emphasis in automation and robotics. Most of my time has been in manufacturing, but I have had some experiences outside of manufacturing, working with government groups, nonprofits, even religious groups. And then there's a magazine called Industry Week. I've written several articles for them. And they have an annual best plants competition, and I've been a judge for that for, almost 10 years now. And I'm a published author. I have a book titled The Facade of Excellence, Defining a New Normal of Leadership. So my co-host is Dr. Mohammed Saleh. So Dr. Mohammed, why don't you introduce yourself?
John, I am so excited about this. I know we talk so much and we share so many stories, and I'm just really happy that people are going to be able to hear some of these stories that we share, because I have benefited a lot just talking to you, and I feel like there's many people that, don't know what's behind the curtain and what people say. And so I'm really excited about this. A little bit about me. So I started off in aerospace, working for a seat designer that made the seats for a supplier for Boeing. And my wife introduces me as a recovering mechanical engineer. So I found my way during that time by an occupational health physician who has been my mentor and someone who I greatly appreciate, who gave me a chance to leap into healthcare. This is 22 years ago. I took the leap of faith. I tried it out. I didn't think it was applicable. And we grew that organization from 8 clinics, primary care clinics, and urgent care clinics to 32 in a very short time frame, under 4 years. Got the attention of a health system who ended up buying us out and wanted to know what our secret to our sauce was. And at that time, the more I know, the more the less I know. And so I realized that, healthcare is a very broad industry. My outpatient experience is very different than my inpatient acute experience. And so led a transformation in healthcare, really focusing on some service lines. Started off with oncology and some alliance work with Memorial Sloan Kettering. And then from that organization, went from an 8,000 employee hospital to a 40,000 employee healthcare system. Led the transformation there for 12 years and had a team of around 30 practitioners who all were just a delight to work with. Learned a lot in that process. At one point, even questioned what I was doing. Decided to get my doctorates to understand what are the elements and traits of organizational characteristics that impede or accelerate new system adoptions, and learned a lot from that experience. And I teach at multiple universities. I've been doing that for over 15 years now. And I also publish for the Lean magazine. It's ever since its inception, very passionate about what I do, and I started my consulting company in 2008 with my partner Dave Steck, and we've been doing that ever since then on the side, and now I'm a full-time consultant.
Very
So
good. So I think what's interesting about this for our audience is that you probably can tell Dr. Muhammad and I approach Lean and Six Sigma from very different perspectives. I started 10 years before Dr. Muhammad, and this was back in the days, the Stone Age of Lean. We didn't have, books to go by. The Toyota Way was still 12 years out from being published when I started down this journey. So we had Dr. Deming and we had Dr. Duran, some of the original folks, but a lot of it we were making up as we went. Whereas Dr. Muhammad is more classically trained. He has a sensei, and he's been through all of the different steps of Toyota production system, and has applied that to the healthcare industry, whereas I've applied a lot of mine to the manufacturing side. So we see things from very different perspectives, and I think that's what's going to be great about this podcast. It's totally unscripted. We pick a topic each week. We don't know what the other person's going to say. And when we discuss this topic and we approach it from all angles, what works, what doesn't work, what we thought worked, but in the end didn't work. And we hope to share these stories and experiences with you so that maybe you can avoid going down some of those same paths that didn't pan out. So in today's episode, the topic we have chosen, and again, I have no idea what Dr. Muhammad is going to discuss on this, but our topic today is for you. What are two essential ingredients for helping an organizational transformation occur and be sustainable for the long term? So what are two critical ingredients to help make that happen?
what a powerful question, because you could list a portfolio of things that are needed. And, when I moved into full-time consulting, I worked with school systems, I worked with energy companies, and I worked with a lot of different areas. And I gained some insights in what works and what doesn't work, and things that I thought worked in one industry that I had this assumption that works in all industries didn't. But it boils down to me for a couple things. So I'll pick two that just come to mind. The first one is trust. I think it's an undervalued element of any organizational success. And I think trust, if I have to bake it into something, because that's such a strong word and it's easily thrown around, I would say the first one is leader's intent. What is the intent of that leader? And do they have purpose? And are they concise and understood? Which opens up really this conversation around psychological ownership of people in the organization. And do they have the clarity they need? And do they have the technical competency? David Marquardt in Turning the Ship Around talks about that a lot. And the more you dive into that trust and trying to understand what that even means, you get into what we call the power index. And how do you move in organizations the power towards where the information is, or the authority towards where the information is, not the other way around, which seems easy to do. But in order to do that, it boils down to behaviors. And so what are the behaviors that are being demonstrated by leaders to foster and create the psychological safety in the organization to nurture this trust? And it then breeds this shared mental model. Does everyone think the exact same way? And if so, do you have behaviors that are being demonstrated correctly, equal to the performance that we're seeing? And I feel, at least I'll talk about myself, in the beginning of my career, that wasn't a key ingredient for me. I was very focused on performance, and I did not understand what it took to get trust. And so I would say that's my first ingredient.
Yeah.
That's a big one for me.
And trust is so easy to lose as well, right? You know,
100%.
you could spend 90% of your time building trust and then lose it with one bad decision.
Absolutely. It's like that fulcrum point. Every morning you have to work on it just so that, because one little thing, that's why it starts with leader's intent. I have to have that intent every day that I'm going to be a servant, humble leader, and trying to be able to demonstrate rituals and practices to foster a behavior that shows people they could trust me.
Okay.
Which, if you're copying what's seen from like the Toyota production system or any tools, it doesn't say any of that. You don't understand the meaning behind these tools. What is it trying to facilitate or foster? I would say trust is number one. Number two, which is another ingredient that I feel like is often missing, and it took me a very long time to appreciate it, is organizational design. This is not a framework. You have to understand that the organization itself is an adaptive open system. And you have to treat it like an organism. And there's socio characteristics. And I spent a lot of time in my doctorates around that to understand what are the characteristics of this organism and what is its traits. And how do I have to remold this new system? If I think of it as a framework, I'm thinking through an operational lens, and I'm missing out on things like adaptiveness. I'm missing out on leadership, on culture. I'm missing out on complex problems because I have one cookie way of solving these things. And so I would say the second one is organizational design. So if I have to boil it down to two, I would say trust and organizational design.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I totally agree. The lean efforts that I've had the most success with various organizations, we've done that. We've actually changed the organizational design away from the more traditional way things are done to something that does lend itself to supporting a team-based continuous improvement effort, right? I mean, like in manufacturing, we tend to have, a quality department, a manufacturing engineering department, an industrial engineering department, all of which, and maybe a safety department, all of which hate each other, right? They don't talk to each other. They have their own goals and objectives that maybe even conflict with each other. And it's like, no wonder problems don't get solved. No wonder nothing changes, because these organizations are constantly in battle. Who's going to come out on top, versus blowing all that up, right? And saying, hey, we're now going to have one resource that wears all of those hats, and they're going to work with the people on the shop floor, and they're going to make change happen right there, at the Gemba, working in the Gemba. I think that's more important than visiting the Gemba.
100%.
And again, what's great about doing that is it's a royal pain to go through all of those changes. But then it's like burning the ships. It's very difficult to go back. Right. So, once you get used to this new organizational structure, this new way of doing things, and people start seeing the benefits of it, you might have to tweak it, a few times, but it becomes extremely difficult to, go back to what it was before without going through that same amount of pain.
Because if you have your organizational design not redesigned, but you just kind of copied and paste what you saw somewhere else, then you're really not fostering a new set of behaviors or rituals. And so what ends up happening, let's say call it daily management, for example, you'll end up having this new system that you installed into an organization pretty much, but all it did is now accelerated the level of scrutiny people are going to get, because you didn't really change the design, nor did you change, nor did you focus on the trust. And so it's just two things that took me a very long time to appreciate, and two things that are not frameworks, and every organization is different in that sense.
Very good. All right.
How about let's flip it a little bit. I'm really interested to see, in your experience, having done this for a long time now, um, things that people don't probably talk about. What are the things that are behind the curtain that you've noticed, of why they fail or not succeed or not make the headway that the potential of that organization could have had?
All right. Yeah. Great question. One that I talk about quite a bit is, and I actually call this the root cause of why a lot of these fail, is for the lack of willingness to change what's foundational to that organization. In other words, let's say an organization's been around 100 years and they've had successes in the past, right? I mean, they've been, successful in the 1950s, in the 1960s, and they're still using principles that were created in the 1950s and 1960s, as far as how, the criteria we use to promote people, the criteria we use to hire external executives or managers in the company, how we measure success, how do we delve out bonuses, management by objectives. All those things are rooted in the early 1900s and were very useful in that time period. But many of those things are 180 degrees counter to what is needed today to support team-based continuous improvement efforts, right? Like, think about it, right? The criteria for promoting someone, and this is a question I love to ask new potential clients, is, hey, list out the last 5 people that were promoted in your company or your organization, and then let's list out what were the criteria you used to decide who got promoted. And if it's things like, oh, well, they're really good firefighters, or they really show a strong ability to control what happens with their people, or they're the ultimate decision makers. Well, see, all of those things are counter to empowering teams, empowering employees closest to the process so that they can address problems real time on their own without a lot of intervention from their leaders.
Yeah.
So the unwillingness to break open, Pandora's box of, hey, let's look at everything that we do and bounce it against where we want to go with this team-based continuous improvement efforts.
Yeah.
Have you experienced
Yeah, I
that?
love what you're saying. The more you were talking about that, the more I am sitting here and saying, you know what, that happens almost all the time. And you don't really see organizations, um, they focus on one system and they don't focus on the other systems, specifically the people development system. And they end up just perpetuating, um, I'll call them classical practices that don't really help the organization move where it needs to move. I remember, one of my mentors, Nigel Thurlow. He would always tell me, Mohammed, there's a big difference between task work and teamwork. And then when you look at the difference, you could have very high performing individuals that do task work, but they're not doing teamwork. And if you're still recognizing authority, and if you're still recognizing command and control, and it's still a battle between them and who goes on to the next level, even look at your performance reviews. Do they pit them up against each other, or do they is it a shared model of recognition? And if they pin them up against each other, then you really haven't changed any of the fundamental foundational stuff as you mature through a journey. I
Yeah,
love what you said.
yeah. In fact, I would say that to get started, at least 50% or more of everyone's objectives should be team-based.
Yeah.
Right. And versus individual. And
Like,
if you're not willing to at least do that to get started, you're not going to have much success.
yeah.
The second one, I put this under the category of what I like to call organizational arrogance. Right. Oh, we don't need to improve. We're already good enough. We don't need to change. You know, one of the first steps for making change happen is to admit that you need to change, right? It's kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Until you're willing to admit you're an alcoholic, you'll never recover from that. So that's
Yeah.
why it's the very first step. Same
Yeah.
thing for organizational, organizations. They first have to admit that they need help, that they need to change, that they need to improve, that they're not excellent. And they want to achieve excellence.
Yeah.
Now, there's also another danger in all this because, again, you and I both have seen many lean initiatives that go for a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, and then just collapses, fizzles out. And I think that's another real danger point
Mm-hmm.
is that, yeah, you start off great, you have some successes, and you're moving the ball really well down the field, and then all of a sudden, people are like, well, we're good enough. Right. And why we don't need to do the teams anymore. We don't need to train anymore. We don't need to develop our people anymore because we're good enough.
Mm-hmm.
The moment that happens, and I've seen this many, many times, the moment an organization reaches that point in their journey, they're dead.
Yep.
Because at that point, they'll start regressing, they'll start falling backwards, and they'll start doing old bad habits. And the people who were kind of resistant along this way will start to raise their heads and saying, oh, I'm going to start doing it the old way. And then all of a sudden, you look back and say, wow, how did this happen? I mean, I remember at Ingersoll Rand, we had a particular division. I won't mention which one they were because, but they were top of the heap. I mean, they were the best in the company by far, best. They'd been doing lean for several years, or they didn't call it lean at that time. It was more team-based continuous improvement. And then they got to a point where they literally said, and I was in this meeting when they said, the leader said, we don't need to do the weekly quality reviews anymore. We're so good. We don't need to do these things anymore.
Yeah.
And what was amazing to me is how quickly they went from the best division in Ingersoll Rand to the absolute worst division in Ingersoll Rand. I mean, we're talking less than a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of these things where the moment you reach that organizational arrogance of we're the best we'll ever be, it might be, hey, we just won the best plants award for the year. Oh, great. We've reached the pinnacle. We don't need to do this anymore. We can relax. Then you're in big, big trouble.
John, you're hitting on it feels like salt to a wound right now, because I've experienced exactly what you said. One of my I would say biggest success stories in the transformations that I had the pleasure of serving with was one organization where we led and became super noticeable in healthcare. To the point where people were visiting us for site tours, and we had to create agendas for all the different tours that were coming in. We were being asked to be on national stages. I think at one year I had keynoted like 4 different keynotes, but we had many conferences that were being asked to go present at. And I remember this book called, at least that taught me the difference between a journey versus a destination. It's an infinite game, or versus a finite game. And, that mindset of that this is a journey versus a destination. And if you do this with the mindset that this is a destination, the second you reach that destination is where everything starts to fall apart. And that's exactly what happened. They felt like, that we have a different problem now. We're everyone wants to learn from us. We're the best of the best. There's no other healthcare system that's doing it like us, and it started to deteriorate really, really quickly. And like you said, I would say even under a year, I saw leadership's commitment kind of back off. Their gloves weren't getting dirty anymore. Lean was starting to be delegated, and it was really sad to see something with so much potential, with so much momentum, start to fizzle.
Well, I tell you, Mohammed, all four of these things that we've listed, the two positives and the two negatives, we could spend 20 minutes on each one of these. So maybe what we need to think about doing is take each one of these in some future podcasts and dig deeper, and
Let's plan
also,
on that.
yeah, and also talk about, how do we prevent these things from happening? But I think these would be great topics, all four of them, for a future podcast. Well, thank you to our audience. This is our first one. We'd love to hear your comments and questions. And if you have topics you'd like to hear us discuss, please share those with us, and tune in next week.
As we draw the curtains on another fascinating episode, we wanted to express our gratitude for joining us on this enlightening journey. If you're hungry for more captivating and thought-provoking discussions with John Dyer and Dr. Mohammed Saleh, hit that subscribe button to ensure you don't miss a beat. Until next week, keep exploring, stay inquisitive, and stay inspired. See you on the next Behind the Curtain adventure.